Well, Phoebe, thank you for joining me here at Director's Notes.
Thank you all for having
So,
me.
we're going to talk about If You're Happy.
Yeah,
I mean, immensely powerful film. And I have to say, just to start the interview, so I'd seen the film and then I was at Bolton Film Festival. And I heard at least two different conversations of people being like, I just went to see this film, like If You're Happy, and people talking about it. So, you've got people talking.
nice. This is what we want, a
Yeah.
conversation starter.
Yeah. There you go. And I mean, so you're in the trenches now with a young baby.
Mhm.
So where did the inspiration for this film come? And then how do you feel about it now that you're in that stage again? There's so much.
I know. So I wrote the film in the early days of motherhood as a first-time mother. Um, and people kept saying to me, "You'll never remember this time." And I found that bizarre, just how like these days were so sort of raw and visceral. And it just made me think, how could I sort of forget these days? Lo and behold, they have sort of ebbed away. And I feel like that whole period of first time motherhood or in those newborn days, it's a bit like quicksand. And it does, like as you get further away from the event, you do just you start to forget the details. So I think there was like an urgency to writing down my lived experiences as they unfolded. And I just write notes in my phone, just write them down as they happen, because actually I'd get to the next day and I'd barely be able to remember what I did the day before. And that is what sleep deprivation does to you. Like it does start to like do something to your, to your brain and how you process information, which
Yeah.
is in itself just quite interesting. Um, so I just collated all of these experiences, and then I read an article during the pandemic. So I had my first child, my first baby, off the back of the pandemic, which I think in itself is a unique time to be bringing a baby into the world. I sort of already felt starved of really sort of deep social connection. And as so many people did. And then I think having the baby, in August 21, when the world just started opening up again. And
Hmm.
I found it really difficult because I was yearning to be outside of my four walls and, to be, connecting with people again and, sort of finding myself again after that extremely strange period of time. And I read an article, sorry, jumping around, in the New York Times about a group of mothers who, during the pandemic, this is over in the States, they would meet every week on a football pitch after they put their kids to bed, and they would stand in a circle and they would scream their lungs out into the night air, and they just didn't have a place to sort of vent this pent up frustration and guilt and shame and everything they were kind of experiencing throughout the pandemic, like homeschooling their kids, taking on far more domestic chores than their other halves. Not speaking for everyone here, but that generally was the case. The stats sort of demonstrate that. And
Yeah.
I guess it was quite a medieval time for a lot of women, and that's not to discount men as well, because there was strain on equal parts. But I love this idea of this communal outpouring, and it took me a moment to work out where that could sit in the film. And this baby group that I went to, all of these details are things that I kind of lived out. And this
Yeah, I
game,
wanted to know if that was a personal experience.
yeah, no, totally. And don't get me wrong, sometimes that baby group was like a total sanctuary. Like on a day where you're just like, I need to get out of the house. I haven't got plans with friends today. I need to actually escape the four walls. But then in other days, it just felt like a really surreal stage. Um, and anyway, so we played this game, passing this box around and making these like infantile noises. And I just thought, what are we doing here? we barely know each other's names. We all know our babies' names, but why are we singing songs and doing this kind of bizarre performance when, the babies are like, they're so little, they're like a matter of weeks. But it kind of struck me that at that time, it felt more important to actually introduce ourselves as women and to just look each other in the eye and say, how are you doing? What's going on with you? What are your challenges? What support do you have? But it just wasn't that. And I felt very drawn to this idea of, the circle, the symbolism of this circle, which historically and has always been this place of unity and safety. Yet there was something skewed, like it didn't feel like it represented that space. Anyway, I've deviated, but now, I guess if I'm being honest, I was sort of preparing myself for If You're Happy, the sequel.
Yeah.
But it's a lot softer. It's a lot softer this time round.
Okay.
And I think, I for one, my son doesn't have colic, which my daughter did, and that was sort of
A lot.
resulted in like 7 to 8 hours of relentless crying a day, and it was really intense. I mean, bless her, like, but it was really intense. I had sort of like noise cancelling headphones just to have some respite from this, like, yeah. But so yeah, it's a lot softer, but I do think, it sort of fortifies my like the need to make something that really represents that time, that first time you become a mother, because now, I've got my coping mechanisms locked down, and
Well,
I've got my
open
hacks.
now.
I can leave the house in 15 minutes, rather than an hour, and I just, you do become desensitized to some of the really just those intense moments. Crying, just doesn't bother me so much now. Whereas before you're sort of sent into this sort of feral state of what's wrong, what can I do? Yeah.
Oh, right, there's so much I want to talk about, but firstly, so I want to talk about, you were saying earlier with that feeling when you were sort of from lockdown and feeling trapped, and you get that in the film where she's in the flat and she's looking out at the builders, and then she's looking out at, I don't know if it's a mother and child or friends on a balcony, and there's just this incredible feeling of she's trapped, and there's that claustrophobia. I loved that. How did you how did you work on that and get that space feeling so tight?
Well, I mean, yeah, the location was always incredibly specific in my mind, and that I knew that it was going to be a challenge. We didn't have a location scout. I was a location scout. I actually came across that area when I'd be pushing Martha around, my daughter, in the pram, and I was like, oh, this is bizarre, this area. But I kind of became obsessed with it, and I'd drive down there and just go and like dwell in that area. And I knew that apartment needed to look out onto, ideally this industrial estate, and then also looking onto these sort of neighboring apartments where she could watch other people's lives unfold and, to serve her isolation. But we got it, we found it,
It works amazing. And then as well, when she's crossing that tunnel, with all the cars coming through and everything that just seems a step away, all of it just does, it seems like this cloistered sort of environment that she's in.
Yeah, totally. And I think, metaphorically, I feel like that environment, represents this sort of void of community, that new mothers feel sometimes. And there's something, you're seeking something quite primal in terms of this community, and you're not really sure what that looks like, here living in the city.
Yeah.
But it just feels like, you're pushing this like tiny little life around in this flimsy pram, and the noise of the city, and people don't care, you do become sort of invisible, like as a woman when you become a mother. It's so interesting. If you walk down the road pushing a pram versus, going to the same corner shop with the pram or going on your own, like the way that people look at you is completely different.
So I wanted to talk about, you were talking about community and these sort of baby groups being a place for women to find each other. But I really noticed the fact that there didn't seem to be any unity there. I mean, the shit she got just for leaving her baby, to go and put a pad in. I wanted to scream at these women and be like, support each other. Was that something that came from your own experience?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't an isolated experience that led to me writing, that scene, but I think it was a collective judgment that I have felt along the way, whether that's from midwives, some of the old school midwives, feeding consultants, things that people say to you in the street, passers-by, strangers, passing judgment very blatantly. That when you're so impressionable as a new mum, you're just like, I hope I'm doing the best that I can. And if someone says something to you, it can play on a loop, like in your head, for days after. If someone makes a comment about your baby's weight, oh, it's on the small side, and you're breastfeeding, and you're like, well, I'm not doing my job. Like, is the baby okay? Like, it does send you into a bit of a spiral.
Yeah.
And there were numerous things that sort of happened in those early days, that just, like, I still think about now. They really stuck with me. Lynette, played by Jo Hartley, became a character that held a lot of what I'd experienced, and yeah, and actually there was something that happened in that baby group where my Martha was just crying and crying and crying, and I was pacing around the edge of this circle, and I couldn't hear what anyone was saying because she was crying so loudly, and I was shushing her. And I remember the teacher looked up at me and she said, "We don't shush our babies in this space. We listen to them." And it was just awful, like, you just crumble, you're suddenly just feel so exposed. And I never put myself in a position of thinking I know best, and especially not when it's such a new experience. But yeah.
No, I can see how I don't have children, whatever, but I've seen my friends go through it. And, I've spoken to loads of people about this film, and friends who are like, everyone thinks that the newborn stage is going to be lovely. And in fact, they're like, it's horrific. Nobody really looks back on it with joy.
No.
So you had years as well as a second AD.
An AC.
AC, yes, sorry.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
right.
So
ADVC.
can you talk about how that influences you now as a director and what you've taken from that, and then what went into this film?
Yeah, 9 years as a camera assistant. I loved my job. I really, really loved my job until I really didn't. I had generally a very patient camera team who, I was always shooting things on the side and, running off at the weekend with a camera from a rental house and befriending the cast sometimes and casting them in shorts. So for me, that it really was like my film school. I didn't really see it like that. I was just doing my job and earning a living. But, looking back now, it was an invaluable period of time, working with incredible directors and DPs, and just, I think if you can get in that close for any period of time, it's just like, yeah, nothing quite beats it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was always shooting on the side, and then I got to a point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I think I was the moodiest camera assistant working. And I just had to cut the cords, because you can just continue to take on job after job, because they do just keep coming, and it's hard to then be like, oh, I'll just do this last one, and then it's it keeps going.
Always one last one.
Yeah, there's always one last one. So I did, and then I think I sort of was just like, right, well, I'm gonna be a director now. I'm directing full time now, and then I was just like, wow, this is really hard. I'm not stepping into anything, And it was only a couple of years later that I thought, God, it's an entire change of career. It's actually not a progression at all. It is like actually stopping doing one job and going in a completely different direction, albeit in the same industry, but they're completely different roles,
Yeah.
And it took me a while to actually untether myself from the logistics and with my loader brain on going, where's the DIT going to put his gear, and like, how's this going to work? It just took a while to actually really, really, really detach and focus on the creative. And this is actually it's the first film that I've written myself, and that was a completely different experience.
Yeah.
And it helped even more to actually detach from like the actual logistics and how to pull the shoot together. I had great producers for that.
Okay, so that's interesting. So I mean, writing, directing it, but you felt you were able to detach rather than be more involved, if that makes sense.
I think I had to, because it was drawing on this lived experience as well. I found it was quite a lot to navigate at times. And my producers, Sophia and Scarlett, they're impeccable producers, and I could just step away. But I think you have to, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
fair. Right, now I want to speak about sound. The sound is amazing. You've got the screaming baby, you've got these beautiful big swathes of music that come through. You've got the sort of creepy kind of horror like Lamar's breathing. That's what I got from it anyway. Yeah, talk to me about building up that sonic scape.
So Inesh is my the sound designer, and Tawia, my composer. Um, I got the ball rolling in both of those departments, like much like before we shot, because I love knowing, when I'm shooting, like what the sound is going to do, and it really informs like how I shoot it and performance. And yeah, I love working in those layers and just having them all kind of floating around here, to tap into. I had an extraordinary conversation with Tawia from the get-go, and it was the first time we spoke, and we didn't even really talk about what the sound should be. We just actually talked about metaphorically like what it could be, like this sort of weeds, like a weed kind of trying to grow up, like this resilient weed growing up through the cracks in the concrete, just in this really urban environment that's kinetic and overwhelming, and you just have this very pure voice that almost kind of represents this primal yearning for life and survival. And she totally got it. She sent a sample back. She went away and she worked on something literally 45 minutes later. And she said, "What do you think about this?" And I was blown away. And that was actually what we used in the end. We tried different things because it felt kind of mad to just go with this very first, like the original idea. And we tried a couple of different things, but we just kept coming back to that very, very first reaction and response to our conversation. And we're like, that is it.
Mm.
So that was really, really exciting. It was really exciting. And Inesh did like an incredible job of, as placing us in this soundscape. When you do listen to it, when you do watch the film in cinema, you are just like kind of surrounded, completely cocooned
Yeah.
and drowning in her world with her.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's amazing. It's such a powerful. I mean, I love music and I think sound is so important in films, but with this one it was and it's right from the beginning, when she's covering her ears and the baby's crying and that sound comes through, and then you've got everything it does. It envelops you. It's amazing.
Mm. Yeah, I had this idea with Dinesh that I never wanted to repeat the same sound of the baby crying.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, like, you know, I'm whenever I watch drama that portrays motherhood, you know, so quickly you forget about the actual like visceral experience of caring for a baby. Like, you know, you kind of get this sort of generic bleating, baby bleating sound. And you know, you're like, that baby's definitely a doll in that carriage. You know, or like, and I think, you know, that was another thing, you know, when I working with Erin, you know, I always, when possible, and I think 9 times out of 10 we did, was to always have the baby, the real baby, on her. Because I think, you know, you become complacent, you know, it's like another example of the empty coffee cup. You know, you
Yeah.
just start throwing it around, and when it's a doll, you just forget, you know.
Yeah.
But the fragility of this tiny body against you, like you do, your whole body language changes. It changes the performance and informs, you know, informs the realism.
Oh, of course. I mean, I'm the same. If someone hands me a baby, I'm sort of like that, and they're like, relax. I'm like, but I don't want to. Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
how was that? I mean, so logistically, you know what it's like working with babies and children. You had so many. How was that planning and everything?
Oh my God, it was really intense. It was really intense. So we had twins for Ella,
Okay.
for the hero baby.
Yeah.
And that was a dream. They did exactly what we needed them to do. Worked with, so you know, quite often you say, you know, you're not casting the baby or the child, you're casting the parent, you know, the guardian.
Yeah.
And in this case, the mother of the twins was just like, she was brilliant. You know, these, I think they were her third. Yeah, she wasn't a first time mum, basically. I think that might have been tricky if she was, because there are periods of time where the babies needed to cry, like, and we needed to turn over for at least sort of 10 minutes, you know, and I built a really good rapport with her. It was really important to me that she could just look at me across the room and go, okay, enough, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we just absolutely pull it no matter where we are in the take. So that was kind of amazingly smooth, you know, the first 2 days. So we shot in chronological order,
Okay.
just for Erin, actually, you know, just to really, for all these layers, just to build and build and build.
Mm.
Um, and then the last day, the church hall with the baby group, it was absolute madness. Because you know, scheduling babies, you know, they have. I'm going to get all the timings wrong here, but I think you've got half an hour with them on camera, which includes any rehearsal time, before they then need a break for about 10-15 minutes, I think. And then you've also got a finite amount of time to spend with them. So I think you've got 5 hours
Wow.
possibly. So obviously that's why we used twins for the hero baby, because we could have 10 hours with them on camera. But
Yeah.
God, it was intense, you know. And actually to know, you know, 4 of the mothers were real mums with their own babies who'd
Okay.
never been on camera before. And yeah, so there was a lot going on. There was a lot going on. There was only one moment where I completely lost sight of, I was like, I'm lost in this shot list, because there was so much coverage and there's so much like connectivity in that circle, you know, so many glances and looks, and you
Yeah.
know, which you need to like build this bed of tension, you know, for the drama to, just to elevate the drama, you know. But yeah, it was really tough.
Yeah, I can imagine. I was watching it, and those the kind of things I was thinking about. I was like, that must be intense.
Yeah, but we got absolutely everything, you know, to the credit of my brilliant first AD and script supervisor, you know, we got everything, you know. But yeah, again, like with all these babies sort of crying in the room, like it does something to you.
Yeah.
It sends people into a slight sort of state of panic.
Yeah. I mean, talking about that panic and that delirium, I need to talk about that scream. It is, it comes from an animal place, which I love. And it comes from a place that I think, you know, yes, it's a new mother suffering this, but I think it's a scream that all women can recognize. How did you rehearse that with Erin? You know, was it rehearsed? How was the reaction on the day? Like, talk me through that scene.
Well, first of all, I'm really glad you said that, you know, that it's an outpouring that all women can connect to, because that was so important. I'd always hoped for this film to sort of to reach beyond motherhood, you know, just to women and to men. And actually, there have been so many men who have been moved, like, you know, in quite an unexpected way, like by this film, which is like everything to me.
And it was a man, it was my editor who put this film to me, and he just thought it was unbelievable. And he was like, you have to watch this film. So, and like I said to you, the conversations I've heard in Bolton, so you have most definitely achieved that. And I don't have children, but that female, I don't know, there was just something about it. So yeah, sorry, carry on.
Okay, so the climax of the whole film, authenticity and energy was what was going to make that work. And it was all in the prep. Well, not all of it, because then we obviously went and shot it. But prep is so important. You know, where are we going to put the cameras? What's our coverage? And, you know, and casting, you know, we had 4 of those mothers in the circle were real mums with their own babies. And, you know, the casting process was intimate and quite private, you know, but one of the exercises that I asked those mothers to do in their self-tape was to imitate the most intensive part of their labour, if they had a natural birth. And I was quite blown away, you know, by the women who really went there. I knew that they had something that they wanted to just expel. So I knew that when the time was right, they would bring it. And then we had 2 actors cast as the mums with actor babies. Actor babies is quite
It's a weird term.
Weird term. But they kind of acted as pillars, you know, so that when Erin went for it, you know, we shot the whole thing in real time. I'd omitted the scene from the sides, so no one really knew what was going to happen. And it was electric, you know, and I hadn't rehearsed it with Erin. I knew from her work as an actor that she has that in spades, so she has it within her, you know, and I just sort of trusted that when we came to it, and from all the conversations that we'd had, and, you know, some material that I'd shared with her, like, you know, she has it instinctively within her. And then, yeah, we played it for real, and it was really shocking. I think, like, even though I'd written this scene and I heard that cry in my head, when I heard it for the first time from Erin, I was really shocked. I was quite moved to tears, as were other people, actually, because I think it just evokes something so repressed within us. You know, it's something that we all want to do at various points. I'm not going to say in the day, because I'm, you know, hope that you wouldn't get to that point every single day.
Okay, yeah, no, not every day, but no,
Not every day, but my God, in our lifetimes. So yeah, and I actually really love this way of working, this sort of hybrid fiction documentary. You know, I think introducing documentary elements, you know, in terms of casting real people based on what they can bring in terms of their own lived experience, and shooting something, you know, almost observing something that you've set up to play in real time is really interesting. It's a really interesting way of working.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, no, that comes through. And that's why I asked you whether it was rehearsed or not, because also, how can you rehearse something that deep and that authentic? You know, there was, whilst obviously Erin's acting and it's a fabulous performance, there's just something there that you're like, yeah, she gets it. And that's how she's feeling. And that comes through 100,000%.
Yeah, and actually shooting the story chronologically really helped. That was, one of the reasons why we made that decision.
Yeah, because it's quite an unusual way to shoot.
Yeah, and it's a luxury,
Hmm.
especially on the short, but we
Yeah,
tried really, really hard to just build it in, into the schedule. It was really important.
yeah, to that crescendo.
Yeah, yeah.
I was talking to someone, I was just thinking, there was someone who I was talking to about a film the other day, and they were talking about how in Irish culture, women, oh, that was it. It was, can't remember the name. She directed the Sinead O'Connor documentary,
Oh yeah.
Nothing Compares. They saw it a talk at Aesthetica, and she was saying that it's kind of gone out of fashion, but back in the day, women would go, next to the coffin or whatever, and it would be called keening, and they would just scream and they would just let out their grief and their emotions. And
Oh,
it sounds amazing, and it sounds like a fucking beautiful way to deal with grief and your
yeah.
feelings. And so she was talking about it in regards to like Sinead O'Connor and her voice and her noises, and she was talking about it, and it reminded me of that as well. It's that female. I don't know. There's just something, and
It
you've
is.
got it on the head.
There's also like the concept of like professional mourners, or wailers. I actually can't remember the name of the artist, but it was exhibited as an immersive experience at one of the Art Angel spaces, where you went into this sort of like cavernous concrete barrel.
Yeah.
It's this space in Angel, and there were like 30 different sets of professional wailers and mourners all grieving and wailing, and you got to kind of walk in and amongst them, and the sound just reverberated like in this space, and it was like it's really intense standing next to someone or witnessing someone like using their voice in that way.
Yeah, there's oddly enough, sort of where I live, the park opposite where I take my dog out in the morning. Quite often, it's if I hit it early enough, there's a guy, and he just stands there and he screams. And I think he does, I don't know, I think he does it most mornings.
Oh,
It's amazing. And I always think, God, you must start your day like feeling good. And sometimes I'm out there and the dog's looking around, like, what's going on? I'm like, he's just having a nice old scream. And it's
oh, that's kind of incredible.
right. Sometimes I want to join in,
Maybe you should.
maybe I should. Because, yeah, there's something about it. Like, I go swimming in the sea and sometimes scream into the sea. I
Hmm.
think that helps because you get it out, but then that's hiding it, and we shouldn't be
Exactly. Well,
hiding it.
that's, we exactly. That's like we're not. There's nowhere for us to really express ourselves in that way. And actually, that going way back to what kind of inspired the story in itself was this idea that we labor. Like we give birth and labor in this room where you're just like this animal,
Mm,
like making these guttural sounds. But as soon as you sort of leave that space, there's nowhere really to like vent your emotion.
yeah, yeah,
It's like the only space in this sort of clinical room in a hospital, where
that's
you can
crazy. That's
speak.
right at the beginning. You've got so much more to come.
I know, exactly, exactly.